The journey of caring for a loved one who is living with dementia can be quite challenging. The aim of this podcast is to make caregiving less daunting and more fulfilling. On this platform, we share knowledge, understanding, and experiences. We enlighten, give hope, and encourage, and in the process create positive awareness about different aspects of dementia. Welcome to my podcast, Dementia Caregivers Corner. My name is Julia Ratladi. Dementia Care, how deep is your love?
Welcome to today's episode of the Dementia Caregivers Corner Podcast. In our last episode, we heard from someone living with dementia. But it's just as important to listen to the voices of those walking alongside them. Today, we are joined by Donna, the daughter of Agnes Houston, one of the UK's most respected voices in dementia activism. While Agnes has shared her own lived experience of early onset Alzheimer's and sensory challenges on this podcast, Donna offers us a powerful look at what it means to support a loved one through this journey. In this conversation, Donna reflects on the early signs, the challenges, and the strength of their mother-daughter bond. She also speaks candidly about what she's learned along the way and how other families might find hope and insight through their story. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Donna to Dementia Caregivers Corner Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. This is season 2 of our podcast. So the first episode, I had an interview with Shelley. Shelley's mom died of mixed dementia last year, I think in November. So we talked about a lot of different topics. Among them, we talked about the seemingly unusual behavior that the mother presented, yet the family didn't know that it was dementia related. That was before the diagnosis. Your mom, Agnes, was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's in 2006. So I want to know, do you remember of any of those unusual behaviors that was a concern that made you want for your mom to go for medical attention and diagnosis at the end?
There were sensory things happening, like she was smelling cat's pee. She was having problems being a passenger in a car. She felt that the cars were coming towards her and it made her quite frightened. But we kept putting it down to menopause because she was only 50, I'm trying to think.
57?
Yeah, so we put it down to menopause. And even though she went to get her diagnosis of Alzheimer's, we weren't having as much problem with her memory at that time. It was frequent stumbles. It was walking into things. So her mobility actually, because her mum was a very liked to be out the house and doing things. So she was having not proper falls, but stumbling, and we realised it was our spatial awareness. And when we kept saying to the early onset team, my mum's falling more frequently, they said, well, that's the dementia. And I said, well, what part of dementia? And also we didn't realise it was affecting our depth perception, so that was our eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Mobility is quite multifaceted. And then there's crossing the road. It's quite a complex thing you do. You stop, you assess the traffic, and then you go. So she was trying to use more pelican crossings, but not everywhere had them. So she got quite frightened about traffic. But her memory, I mean, she did get lost going to work. And when she was diagnosed, she was put on Aricept. And then very quickly after her diagnosis, it was suggested she go to the Scottish Dementia Working Group, where she met other people with dementia. And having supported my mum going to these groups, you could never always tell who had dementia. It wasn't when people say, your mum doesn't look like she has dementia, which they still say to this day. I say, how does dementia look like? But it was in meeting other people with dementia and saying in the quiet tea times, do you fall a lot? or do you stumble? And then there was other things which we didn't realise, like the sound. So being overwhelmed by sound in like a busy shopping centre. And just over time, but every time we've said to the professionals, my mum gets nervous at this time, or they say that's the dementia. And I said, well, what part of dementia? What part of the brain? Because my mum was an ICU nurse and I was a general nurse. So we were used to having a why. So you have a symptom and then you have why you have the symptom. And we weren't getting taught anything about the why. And people were actually saying, but that's not dementia. But there was a whole host of which we now know as sensory challenges that was very much part of dementia. And people, because my mum was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they kept saying about her memory, and her diagnosis has been questioned by, I want to say, lay people, to the point where she got diagnosed twice with 2 different doctors. So we kept saying, my mum does have Alzheimer's, but it doesn't manifest as people perceive. And that was quite difficult as well. So people said, if your mum falls, then she can't leave the house safely. But that's very restricting and unfair. And we got a lot of our answers when we went to Canada. A person living with dementia longer than my mum said, I think you have neurological vision impairment. And it's basically the signals from the eyes to the brain and back again aren't firing as well or as quickly. So she wasn't seeing the pavement, she wasn't seeing the step in time, and various things about her peripheral vision as well. So we went to the optician quite a lot and then to ENT, and eventually she was diagnosed with neurological vision impairment. So she's now partially sighted, but it's the dementia, it's the neurological part that's causing it.
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite fascinating, but very frustrating, especially in the early days.
In season 1, I interviewed Lynette Lee. Lynette Lee is an author of a book called Sleeping Aware, One Man's Battle with Alzheimer's, which was dedicated to her dad who lived with dementia. And she said when the dad was now diagnosed, it was a relief to the family because they now knew what they were dealing with. I think I've picked that up from you, that at least eventually you knew what it was. Because when you know better, you do better, right? Were you able to know the next step to take after the diagnosis?
After the diagnosis of dementia, my mum had a quite a low point. But when she was introduced to the Scottish Dementia Working Group and others with dementia, that's when she had hope, because there was people that had been diagnosed for 8 or 9 years and they were going to meetings, they were still living at home, and that gave hope to us. And then it helped empower us to put things in place. And because she was diagnosed so early in her dementia, we could put things in place that became routine. So it was kind of, we did the reminders, and then it became long-term memory and not short-term memory. We put notices on the door saying, remember your keys, remember your glasses, remember to lock the door. We had an alarm on her phone to remind her to take her tablets. And we tried to support her to still go out. And some people said to me, oh, you need to tell your mum not to leave the house. And I'm like, that's not an enforceable thing. My mum's still got autonomy. And by that point, 2 years into my mum's diagnosis, my dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's and vascular dementia. And he was also a man that went out every day. But what we learned with my mum, we managed to put things in place for my dad to support him. We had an SOS tracker on his house keys, so he could press the button and it would phone my phone. So if he felt upset or if he felt he was lost, he could press the button and it would phone my phone, and I'd answer the phone and say, hello, Dad, how can I help you? It was putting safety in, but allowing within that network for people. But it helps if the person with dementia has insight. A lot of these things we put in place, if the person hasn't accepted the diagnosis and understand on a daily basis that they have dementia and it might cause problems, you can only really put certain things in place if the person is got that level of awareness. And that's why early diagnosis is so crucial, to get that period of time when the person knows they has dementia. We can put things in place. We can put technology in place, because there's no point in diagnosing someone late, because a lot of the interventions the person can't handle. So my mum gets telecare. So they phone her in the morning through a computer screen, so she sees a person, and they say, "Good morning, Agnes.
Yes.
It's time to take your tablets." And then at night at 6 o'clock, they do it again. And the great thing for that for me is I don't worry, because I know at 6 o'clock, if I don't have a phone call, I know mum's in the house. And that's why the GPS for my dad was so crucial, because my dad didn't always answer the phone. So he needed a different kind of telecare to help him go out into the world. And that was quite difficult, to support people with dementia to safely navigate the world. It's a very difficult balance, because the person still has the right to make decisions. They still have the right to make mistakes. And it was a very challenging position to be in, because you want your parents to be safe. And my mum and dad both, what gave them meaning in life was to leave the house and interact with people. So it was a very difficult balance, and telecare helped with that. But no amount of telling my dad to use a ramp instead of the stairs. He always insisted on using the stairs, so my dad had many falls. And we were very fortunate that he usually fell in public, so people would phone the ambulance. That was a risk that he chose to make, which was very challenging for people who loved him.
Yes. What I'm picking up from what you are saying is that there is no one size fits all care.
Yeah.
It has to be personalized.
Yes. It has to be tailored to the person. And as I say, we were very fortunate. Before lockdown, my dad started to go to the gym. And the reason why he started to go to the gym was to shower, because he couldn't navigate the bath. To access the shower, he didn't have a wet room. So we got him joined to the gym. So he would shower at the gym. And then someone he knew said, "Why don't you come and do line dancing?" And from that, he started taking classes at the gym, which helped his falls, got him social. And it was really funny, because all the classes for over 50s all had mainly women. There was no really men went, apart from my dad. So he had an entourage of ladies who helped kind of keep him right for his classes and things like that. And it gave him a sense of purpose. It gave him activity. But we were very, very fortunate that there was a gym within walking distance, because my dad's comfort zone, the geographical comfort zone, was very small. So we were very fortunate that he lived close to the bank, close to the library, close to his gym. So he didn't have to go further afield, because he stopped being able to manage the bus. But that, I feel, kept my dad energised, because he was a very fit man. And as I say, it was hard. He would have to remind him, don't take the stairs, because his perception of where his body was and how high he was lifting his leg, proprioception wasn't very good. So he would kind of clip the stair going up and down stairs, or miss the bottom stair. And that was sensory. But we gained knowledge from other people with dementia to help my dad. All the help and knowledge came from people with dementia. They would say, "Well, I do this. Have you tried that?" And that's why the meetings with people with dementia, peer support, is very important.
It is, Donna. When I talked with Agnes on our last episode, she mentioned that you and her got angry at their situation, how the system was failing you in some certain ways. And you made just a conscious decision to say, we are going to stick together and fight, if they say fight to it, but go on this journey together. I want to know, Donna, what kind of support were you not getting in those early days? And I want to know if things have improved now. 2006, your mom was diagnosed. Today's 2025. Are there any changes to the support system that you've gotten then and now?
What happened is because we went to so many different meetings, we found out about self-directed support. So what we found, what the social work supply in general was 4 15-minute visits. So we didn't need them, but my dad, we needed someone to prompt him for medication and breakfast. So we got one visit, 15 minutes, but my dad had worked out that they left him to last. So if he left the house at 10:30, he would miss them because he didn't feel that he needed help and support. And eventually we stopped the visits because there was no point. He'd already managed to work round the help that we tried to supply for him. And that 4 15-minute visits is fine if someone's housebound, but not if someone wants to be out and about. There was an early onset support team, but they only talked about memory. They didn't really have any knowledge about sight, about hearing, because my mum was starting to be sensitive to everyday sounds, which was very difficult for her to manage because life is quite noisy. So if you go to a shop and they're playing music, that's just how your environment is. But when we realised that she was getting overwhelmed by the sound, my mum has noise-cancelling headphones. So at the time, they were developing self-directed support, which you got a budget, a personal budget, and you could purchase care with that. At first, it was a care company supplied a support worker for my mum, and she got 9 hours a week. This started before lockdown. And we hold our budget now, and we employ 2 personal assistants. So we get 9 hours a week support. So that person or persons comes in and supports my mum for everyday tasks over the week. But she doesn't need daily visits. And that's where what was supplied in 2026 and what's supplied now, but not everybody gets self-directed support. Out of the way of what support newly diagnosed people get, because as time went on, we then established a group called Dementia Alumni, and that was for a handful of people who'd been diagnosed over 9 or 10 years, and that was developed in 2015. It came out of the booklet that we developed, Dementia and Sensory Challenges, because we got so frustrated that the sensory aspect that we knew from questioning other people with dementia were having, and there was no information. So when we did the booklet, we interviewed 26 people with dementia, with different kinds of dementia, and pretty much everybody we interviewed had some aspect of sensory challenges. Sometimes it was contrast, that was the other thing. And if you go into design for people with dementia, white on white, so like light switches, you can't see the light switch. So if you put an electrician's tape around the light switch, it causes a contrast. Putting a white plate on a red or blue placemat means you can see the edge of the plate. There's all sorts of tips and strategies. But what the booklet that we did in 2014, 2015, it was like a challenge because we kept getting told this wasn't dementia and there wasn't any evidence to support that it was. So we basically got a small amount of funding from Life Changes Trust, interviewed and videotaped people. So there's actually a video on YouTube, if you could put in dementia and sensory challenges, of about 10 people speaking about their sensory challenges with dementia. And it covered taste, smell, hallucinations, balance. So it was like a challenge to the professionals. Here we have 25 people with dementia with sensory challenges. What do you think about this? But when you went into the eye, the ophthalmology, they said, oh yes, that affects this. And then if you went into hearing, they would say, oh yes, that affects that. So in individual silos, people had the information, but it wasn't under the dementia umbrella. And that's why we pushed it, because we had heard from carers getting frustrated with people, not understanding why they wouldn't eat the food that they were cooking for them. But that was the taste buds sending signals to the brain, and the brain going, I don't recognise this taste. This is unsafe. So what was familiar became unfamiliar. And both my mum and my dad and other people noticed that they either went off things or they started to crave things. And the person who was caring for them was very puzzled, because for 50 years they liked X and now they don't like it. And actually it was the brain. And it also helped carers understand, because nobody was telling them that was part of dementia. They thought this was something completely different. So it was a challenge to the professionals, the booklet, saying, this is our lived experience. It's the words of people with dementia, for people with dementia. What are you going to do about it? So now it's been accepted and people are doing research on it. And there's much more research with dementia and sensory challenges.
We love that. It has to get out to the people. People have to know that there are sensory challenges. Thank you, Donna. So tell me now, how did your bond with your mom, or your relationship with your mom, how did it improve after their diagnosis? Did you experience any challenges with your relationship, or you came together as one?
It took a while to adapt to being a supporter. Of course, the initial diagnosis, everybody's very upset. And what we were getting told was, you've got 5 years. And of that 5 years, you've got 2 good years, and then the rest, they literally said, we'll be in a nursing home. So I thought, so I've got, say, 2 to 3 years, and I'll be the best supporter I can be. And then the professionals come in, and then I'll get help. And that didn't happen, because my mum didn't develop. I'm going to say traditionally, that my personal belief is that people with dementia were diagnosed a lot later in days gone by. You have to start forgetting your family before you were getting diagnosed. And what was happening is my mum was diagnosed when she was at work, because subtle things were happening at work that made dementia more apparent. You could point out, you've forgotten how to do that, you've forgotten how to answer the phone, you've forgotten this, you've got lost on the way to work. So my mum was diagnosed earlier. So where I thought the help would come, nothing happened, because my mum was still in the community being supported.
Yes.
I started to go with her to support her to meetings, and I kept waiting for the professionals to come in. But the professionals were rigid in the 4 visits a day for 15 minutes. That was the help that you got, and that wasn't tailored to my mum. And that's why self-directed support in Scotland, because I don't know if they have it anywhere else, really helped my mum, because she got one person or 2 familiar with her. So she didn't have to keep explaining that, yes, she had dementia, this is what she needed help with. And also the internet connected my mum to people with dementia in Australia and Canada, America, Europe. So keeping my mum connected by technology. She's got an iPad. She has to be retrained in the iPad. So we needed a support worker who was good with IT, and we've got that. But my dad went totally opposite. He wasn't interested in the internet. He was just interested in his gym and going to see his friend in the pub and trying to do crossword puzzles. So you have to tailor it to the person. But we were getting told at the very start, you'll see a deterioration in skill. The other thing I'd like to say was, my mum's supported by a Sight Scotland veteran, because my mum's a veteran. So if anyone has got someone with dementia who was in Army, Navy, Air Force, even if it was for 10 days, you would get some support through the veteran societies. My dad got visits from a man who would reminisce with my dad. And my mum, she goes to a day centre for people whose eyesight, now it's not eyesight that's been in the war, it's just you are a veteran, you're having sight issues. And that's been very helpful. So if your person with dementia has another condition, you might be able to get help. If say it's diabetes, you might be able to get help from the Diabetes Association, or if you've got hearing problems, from the Deaf Society. There's more help out there than we think. It's just not in a kind of one-stop shop,
Mm-hmm.
and you've got to kind of ask around. So my dad going to the gym, that wasn't a dementia-friendly class, but because people knew he had dementia, they just gently supported him. And it was the same with my mum. She started going to yoga, which actually helped with her balance. But because yoga, the way you do it, they give you instructions continuously. So it's actually quite dementia friendly. So it was very intense at the start. We were very upset. We thought the roof had fell in. This is awful. This is terrible. And then when we met other people with dementia, we went, wait a minute, a good life can be had with dementia. And that's where the journey started. And then my husband supported me to give up work so I could put the time in to support my mum. And I thought, well, this will be for a year or two, and then my mum will get professional support. So here we are 19 years later.
Yes.
19 years later. And also, what I would like to say is I've had someone in my family with dementia since I was 17, because my dad's mum had dementia, but it was diagnosed at round about 80, so it's like old age dementia. I like to clarify, yes, it was Alzheimer's, but it was diagnosed at later age.
Okay.
And then my mum's dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and he was in his late 70s. And there can be a difference in support if someone's older and someone's younger. My granddad eventually got into a day centre, and he was managed at home with the family. My grandmother eventually ended up in a nursing home, but she couldn't talk, but she still recognised people. And that's the thing I was very fortunate with. Of the four people, my two grandparents, my mum and dad, they always remembered who I was. So that, I'm going to say, traditional, where someone forgets you. Everybody's journey is individual. Not everybody forgets people. So I can't compare myself, because other people's journeys are so different. As I say, my mum, my dad, even when my dad had cancer in the hospice, he still knew who he was, and he knew who we were. And that was the same with my granddad. He always knew he was John, and he knew a few of the family, but he knew who he was. So that kind of forgetting, he knew he was retired. So not everybody's journey is as it's portrayed. Everybody's journey is unique. Because I said to a geriatrician at a conference, I put my hand up and said, how come my granddad can still play dominoes and beat me when he didn't know what he had for breakfast? And the man said, that's because the reservoir in his brain, the part of the brain that does dominoes, is still intact for whatever reason. And that's the thing I remember my granddad, even at the end when he was in hospital, he could still beat me at dominoes. And did intrigue me so much that this aspect of my granddad was still sort of there. So it's kind of saying to people, we're not saying don't expect certain things, but not everybody manifests. Everybody's unique. I think that's, if you know one person with dementia, you know one person with dementia. And not everyone will live for 19 years with dementia. One of my mum's friends, James, he was diagnosed in 1999. So there's still people alive who were diagnosed before my mum. But not everybody has that journey. Some people's journey are quick, some are medium. I don't want to misrepresent, and that's where the uniqueness comes in. One of the things my mum had a problem with was her handwriting. She had beautiful, what they call copper plate handwriting, and now she uses block.
Mm-hmm.
And she uses bigger letters. So things like handwriting and value for money, the number of discussions we have had about the value for money. Even when I say to Mum, I'm buying you a plate of chips, and she says, that's too dear for chips. And I says, look, it's inflation. I said, I tell you what, I'll buy you your chips. And she says, no, I don't want you to buy it. It's not worth that money. Now, that could be aging in general. Because you remember when chips were a pound, were like 50 pence or something. So it could be aging, it could be unique to my mum, but she has this thing about value for money. And my mum's 76. So when she first started working, it would be the old money. And obviously with inflation, things that were £1 or £2. So I was teaching her that the fiver is a new pound. So if something's under a fiver, then it's relatively going to be value for money. But sometimes she just gives me a card, a bank card, and say, pay for that, because I don't want to know how much it is. And it was the same interesting with my dad. I would say to him, I'll treat you for dinner. And he says, no, it's okay. I've got something in the house. So you got to pick your battles. And I'm not saying you agree to everything, but you kind of say, is this worth having a discussion? And try to put a bit of humour into it, because dementia is quite serious, but sometimes it can be quite amusing. And you're not laughing at the person, you're laughing with the person, because I say my mum and my dad used to have quite hilarious conversations when they were reminiscing, and they'd remember it differently. And that also is not necessarily dementia, but reminiscing is very powerful. I did it by accident with my granddad. And if we'd had smartphones when my granddad had dementia, we would have done a lot more with music.
Mm-hmm.
We did a lot with my dad with music and YouTube. So we'd look at old black and white films of, say, the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. So things don't always have to be very serious.
Yes.
And reminiscing is very powerful. And the reason why music is very powerful is it's stored in different parts of the brain. So you might have a song that reminds you of being in Paris, or you might have a song that you dance to at the dancing.
Mm-hmm.
I think they said that music is stored in multiple parts of the brain, and that's why music can be so powerful with someone with dementia. And you don't need a fancy listening device. YouTube, I found, is invaluable. And then when my dad was in the hospice, they had Alexa.
Yes.
So you could ask Alexa to play music. And I left them a list of my dad's favourite ones that he liked. So my dad, he manifested his sensory. His falls continued, whereas my mum remembered to be a bit more careful. But spatial awareness, like you could knock a cup over, or if you're pouring, because this happened to a lady, I was a nurse in the community, and we were trying to explain to the doctor that she couldn't make a cup of tea because she would miss the cup with the kettle. She couldn't judge distance.
Yeah.
And that can be an aspect of dementia, because in the book Aging with Grace, which was a book about the nun study, they had a test in their dementia test where you put on and off a jumper, because that's a multi-task thing. It's quite complicated putting a jumper on if you're thinking each stage. So things like judging distances, so people start walking into corners of tables, they trip a lot, and also carpets in hotels and various public spaces. Some of the carpets are swirly, they're optical illusions. Sometimes there's mirrors, which can be really quite difficult for people, or even if the floor's shiny, especially if it's black or a dark colour, because it was difficult driving with my mum and dad, because their sense of where things were coming from seemed closer.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that happened was I was driving out of a car park, and you drove out over a pavement, and they'd obviously dug a trench in the pavement, and they'd put black tarmac. So there was a big thick black line of tarmac, and my dad was in the car, and he basically went, "Stop!" And I stopped the car, and we had to get out, stand on the pavement and stamp the black spot, because my dad thought it was a hole and the car was going to fall in it. And even though we were literally standing on the black tarmac, stamping with our feet, he said, it still looks like a hole. And I said, you know what we'll do? If you get back in the car, and I'll tell you to close your eyes, and then I'll tell you when you can open them. And that's how we get over the black spot.
Black hole.
The big hole. And that's why my mum doesn't have a television, because the black screen makes her think of that your hand would go through it. So we tried putting a blanket over the telly, but she didn't, because of her eyesight, she doesn't really watch television. She might watch something on her iPad that's closer. So it's adapting to, because I had someone else and it was snowing and everything was white. So he had the same thing, but it was white rather than black. So that came up quite a lot, misinterpreting what you're seeing as something else.
You've said quite a lot there. I want to break it down how I understood it. You talked about reminiscence as a tool that can be used. I love that. I wanted to ask you, did your parents love music before?
Yes, my dad used to do the music quiz at the pub. So he used to, play tracks, the first couple of sort of notes, and then you'd guess the song. So we used to do that a lot, play guess the song. My mum isn't as much into music, but she does. She's quite spiritual, so she might listen to Elvis singing gospel songs and things like that. But there's usually some songs from childhood that people have a good memory of. And then also you can play favourite films. My dad used to do that with his DVDs. He had 2 or 3 films he really, really liked, and we'd play them quite frequently. It's just trying to get to where the person with dementia is, and not trying to get them to fit into you. You have to fit into their likes, dislikes, within reasonableness. But, if the person wants to eat egg and chips quite frequently over a week, it's going to do them no harm.
Mm-hmm.
And, a sweet treat. And that's the thing my mum actually said yesterday. She's been craving a lot more sweet things,
Yes.
where she didn't really have a sweet tooth.
Oh.
So there's more biscuits and there's more dessert, but there's no harm in it unless the person's diabetic. And even if they are, a treat once in a while isn't going to be have too much problems.
Yes.
So it's getting into the person's wavelength.
Yes. No, I just wanted to establish that because something that you mentioned when you were discussing that long point. Another thing that you made, you talked about being around people with dementia at the age of 17, with your families and great grandparents. Do you ever sit and think like, okay, am I going to go the same path as them? And am I prepared? Because now I know better.
I'm going to say, more prepared. I sadly lost my husband to motor neuron disease, and I had him all sort of cushioned up on my favourite music, my favourite films. I used to say, just pop me on a chair, put on the Disney movies, make sure there's cake. And I know some people with dementia who live alone, so I am statistically more likely to get a dementia diagnosis, but I don't tend to let it worry me because I've met far too many people with dementia who are having a good life. It might be slightly different from the one they had before dementia. So so I've kind of filled out you used to have This Is Me forums, and you'd fill out your likes and dislikes. So I'll need to fill one out officially. So I'm not as worried because I've kind of informed people, This is my favourite. As long as you feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
My gran, she'd become non-verbal, but she would stroke your face and smile at you. If you sat and were at her eye level and held her hand, she would stroke your face and smile at you. And there was a connection. So there's always a connection. You just need to get to where the person with dementia is. And I just hope that if I do get dementia, that I've got people that'll meet me where I am. But so I don't really dwell on it, if you know what I mean.
Yes, I do. And then besides, I think it's just like everyone needs a plan about the future, and not necessarily because somebody is living with dementia. Going on, I've just searched your name because I was trying to see who I'm going to talk with. And I've seen your mom's articles. Almost every article that I've come across online, your mom is singing praises to you, Donna. Everything. So I'm deeply grateful for Donna. Why do you think that is the case? I'm asking you this because I've been with different families. I've read or I've interviewed people in this podcast where having a parent living with dementia now had to break the family As one of the people that I've interviewed here, she said to me, Julia, dementia is intense. Caring for somebody with dementia is intense. You got to be careful not to fall out as siblings, as family. And here I am looking at these articles with your mom or about your mom, just singing praises to you. What are you doing differently?
I gave up my job. That's basically it. I thought that when my mum was diagnosed in 2006, I'll give up my job. I'll support her through that window I was told there was going to be. And then the professionals will come in and I can go and get a job again. And I discussed it with my partner and I said, we've been told there's only going to be 2 or 3 years. I was very grateful for him for that space, because I said to him, I need to be able to look myself in the mirror. I'm an only child.
I was going to ask that. Yes.
So it kind of escalated. I got my mum in a routine. Then my dad got diagnosed. That was very difficult to get my dad diagnosed. That took a lot of time. He got into a lot of financial difficulty. He was resisting any input to help, a bit like taking the stairs. He would always take the stairs. He would never take a ramp. It was exhausting. You were constantly worried. We didn't have the telecare, nor did we have the GPS sorted at that time. It took a long time, and I used that time to support my mum at all the meetings. And we got very into the dementia, Alzheimer's societies, and we went to a lot of conferences, and it just kind of, it'll be another year. So I could not have done what I did if I still had a job. And that's put me in a lot of financial problems, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I did genuinely think, I got told, say 3 years, 4 of you, and I was in my 30s, I'm now 51. So it also affected my relationship with my partner, because I was spending a lot of time with my parents, but I kind of had put that in my head. I've only got a short window. That's what I was told. And then the time I realised it might be longer, I'd kind of committed to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought my mum's campaigning that she wouldn't be able to sustain it. And even during lockdown, there were Zoom meetings, though during lockdown, mum didn't need support. I'll rephrase that. She couldn't have support from me because I was in England with my partner. And my mum and dad were in Scotland. So I used that as a tool to get my dad some social work help. And then my mum had the personal assistant. So she had that person all through lockdown. In the meantime, I was nursing my partner with motor neuron disease. So I couldn't see my parents because I couldn't leave my partner. And the irony of everything was a small part of people with motor neuron disease develop frontal temporal dementia. So when I was in the motor neuron disease, I'm going to say forums, I was guiding people to the dementia field.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was saying, if the person's developed dementia, ask the Alzheimer's Society for help. And they actually got their person into an Alzheimer's Society daycare. So yeah, my partner allowed me the time, the money and the effort to do what I did, which enabled me to support my mum.
Yes.
There was no way I could have done that and held down a job.
Yes. I know situations are different. Would you encourage someone to go the same path that you went with, leaving your job and totally caring for your mom, right?
I would say go part-time.
Okay.
Ask if you could go part-time. My friend supported her mum, but she did 2 12-hour shifts. And even when I was giving up my work, my friends went, don't give up your work. And I said, it's only for a few years. And they kind of said, what if it's not? So it's not a regret as such, because we got a lot out of it. My dad would hardly have been diagnosed if we hadn't, because he was only 58. And of course, my brain was saying, what's the chances of both your parents getting diagnosed with dementia under the age of 60? So yes, once I had committed the time, there was always another booklet or another conference. And I apologised to my husband so many times, going, I'm sure it's just another year and then it'll all calm down and we can get social work in and I can take a step back. And it just never happened.
19 years later.
Yes. Well, I took a sabbatical first. And then My dad took longer to get him into a routine, and he had so many frequent falls. Every time he thought everything's stable and steady, something would happen. So I would definitely not recommend giving up your job.
Totally. Yeah.
Totally. I would try and go have a couple of part-time hours, or alternatively, keep your job, see what the social work can give to your parent.
Yes.
Can you work round it? Because my friend, her mum, I'm going to say, was a homebody. So she could get care in to the house. Whereas I say, when I tried that with my dad, he would leave. But no, I would think very, very, very carefully. Now,
hard about it.
Because I was in my 30s. Now, if I was in my 50s as I am now, possibly. But I would think very, very hard for the consequences for your pension, for your mental health. A lot of people like their job to meet people and be a productive member of society. I feel I was quite productive.
You were?
Supporting my mum and dad. And again, as I said to my late partner, I can look myself in the mirror and say, I did the best I could. But the best for someone else might be working and getting the social work to support the person with dementia or another family member.
Yes.
But yes, I wouldn't recommend giving up your job.
I don't know whether you are aware of Wendy Michelle.
Yeah, we had the pleasure of meeting Wendy quite soon after her diagnosis at a Women in Dementia conference. She was a lovely lady, and I followed her blog.
Because I remember in one of her books, in her memoir, when she said she wouldn't wish her daughters to be her carers. She wanted them to be her daughters. That's why I wanted to know, how would you advise the children whose parents lived with dementia? Let me ask you the last question. If you were to write a book, Donna, from a caregiver's perspective, what would you address in that book?
I think I'm going to say trying to get the social work or carers in earlier. Also, the telecare, if the person accepts that, not everybody can handle computers and phones and things. I think the use of telecare is starting to get better, and that can really supplement the journey with the person with dementia. As I say, my dad's had GPS on his car key, not his car keys, his house keys, and I could text the tracker, and the tracker would text me back saying a wee map, pinpointing where my dad was, so I could see he was in his house. I didn't have to phone him or worry about him. So anything that relieves your worries while still helping the person to be autonomous as much as they want to be or is safe to do so. And I think there's been a lot of telecare advances. A lot of people have a ring doorbell, or they have cameras in the house. So yeah, I think I would say to people, investigate what technology can help you with. Because I spent many a day phoning my dad at home and he wasn't answering, and I would jump in my car and I would go and he'd be fine. He would be perfectly fine. He just decided not to answer the phone. So yeah, any kind of computerised telecare as a first stop rather than an add-on.
Yeah.
See what technology can do for you.
Yes, I love that. See what technology can do for you. Let me take this time, Donna, to thank you for your time. I know we can talk until Thank you very much for availing yourself on our podcast. I believe whoever is going to be listening to this podcast, they're going to get the germs that you shared with us. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for asking. It's a passion of myself.
I can tell you are a nurse anyway, so you are surrounded by helping people. All right, let me take this time and thank you, our dear listeners, for tuning into this episode. If you enjoyed our conversation with Donna or are passionate about dementia care as she is, please consider leaving a review and sharing this episode with someone who might benefit from it. Your support helps us reach more and more people concerning dementia-related issues. Until next time, take care and bye for now. Dementia Care. How deep is your love?